All right, so we're going to be taking a deep dive today into CrowdStrike's Q3 2025 earnings.
Okay.
If you want the scoop on their performance, financials, the outlook, the good, the bad, and maybe the ugly, we've got you covered.
Right.
We've gone through their earnings presentation, and I think there's some seriously interesting stuff in here.
Absolutely. CrowdStrike's always making waves in the cybersecurity world, so always something interesting to look at with them.
The first thing that jumps out at you is the sheer scale of this company.
Right.
They just crossed a massive milestone, over $4 billion in annual recurring revenue.
Wow.
That's a cybersecurity empire built on subscriptions.
It's remarkable to reach that level, especially in such a competitive market. Shows they're definitely doing some things right.
And speaking of doing things right, their year-over-year growth is pretty amazing. 31% for subscription revenue, 29% for total revenue, and a whopping 33% for subscription gross profit.
Yeah, and what's even more impressive is they're not just growing, they're growing profitably. Maintaining that balance, especially at scale, is a feat a lot of companies struggle with.
So growth is great, but what's fueling this growth?
Right.
The presentation keeps mentioning this Falcon platform.
Yeah.
It seems like their customers aren't just buying one product, they're buying into this whole platform concept.
It's a really smart strategy from CrowdStrike because they're not just offering a toolbox, they're building a whole workshop. And more customers are using multiple modules within this Falcon platform. So they're becoming reliant on CrowdStrike for a wider range of their security needs.
So it's about making themselves indispensable. Would that be a fair assessment?
Exactly.
And the numbers back that up. Over 66% of their customers subscribe to 5 or more modules.
Wow.
And 20% are using 8 or more.
That's amazing. That kind of deep integration suggests that CrowdStrike is becoming mission critical for a lot of organizations. And they have this flex model where customers are averaging over 9 modules.
It's like they're saying, come on in. We've got everything you need to stay safe in this crazy digital world.
Exactly.
And they're winning awards from all these analysts too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. They're consistently ranked at the top by firms like Gartner and Forrester.
Okay.
These are the heavy hitters in the analyst world.
Right.
Like, for instance, they were named a leader in the Gartner Magic Quadrant for endpoint protection platforms for the 5th time in a row.
So they're at the top of their game.
It seems that way.
But before we get too carried away, the presentation also mentions this July 19th incident.
Oh, yes.
Sounds a little ominous, right?
Yeah, a little bit. It's shrouded in mystery, but it seems to be creating some headwinds for the company. They mentioned things like delayed pipeline generation, extended sales cycles, and even some customer churn.
Okay, so a bit of a mystery there.
Yes.
But before we jump into that too deeply, let's switch gears and talk about their financials.
Okay.
And a quick disclaimer before we get into this. This isn't financial advice. We're just breaking down the information and highlighting what we find interesting.
Right, deep diving into the data.
Exactly.
Not telling you what to do with your money.
Now back to those numbers. They reported $231 million in free cash flow, an operating profit of $2.93 per share. And they're really touting this rule of 51, which combines revenue growth and free cash flow margin.
Those are some very healthy numbers.
Yeah.
Strong free cash flow means they have the resources to invest in research and development, make strategic acquisitions, and really weather any potential storms that might come their way.
So financially, they seem to be in a really good spot, despite this July 19th incident looming in the background.
Right.
What about their outlook for the rest of the year?
Well, they're projecting continued growth, both for Q4 and the full fiscal year 2025, but they're also acknowledging the potential impact of this July 19th incident.
Right.
So there's a bit of wait and see baked into their guidance.
Okay, so some uncertainty there.
Yeah.
Well, let's try to dig a little deeper into this July 19th incident. What clues can we get from the presentation?
Sure.
What do we actually know about what happened?
So to be honest, the presentation itself is pretty tight-lipped on specifics.
Right.
It mentions a delay in the vast majority of outbound pipeline generation activities for a few weeks following the incident.
Okay, so pipeline generation activities, that sounds like sales and marketing stuff.
Right.
So did something happen that prevented them from reaching out to potential customers?
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. But again, we're speculating a bit here.
Right.
The presentation also mentions extended sales cycles for both new and existing customers.
Okay.
Suggesting that maybe the incident created some hesitation among customers, making them less eager to sign on the dotted line.
And they also mention customer commitment packages, or CCPs.
Yes.
What are those and how do they tie into this?
Yeah. So imagine them as a way to incentivize customers to commit for the long haul, even with this uncertainty surrounding the July 19th incident. These CCPs are bundles of services and discounts that CrowdStrike offers to customers who are willing to sign longer-term contracts.
So it's like, hey, we know things are a little shaky right now, but stick with us and we'll make it worth your while.
Yeah, exactly.
But even with these CCPs, they're still seeing what they call muted upsell rates and potentially higher than typical levels of contraction.
Right.
So in other words, some customers aren't expanding their subscriptions as much as they normally would, and some are even reducing their spending.
Right.
Okay, so the July 19th incident, IS having an impact on their business, even if we don't know exactly what it was.
Right.
Any theories?
Well, the presentation doesn't really shed any light on the nature of the incident itself,
Right.
so we'll have to wait for more information from the company or from industry insiders to get a clearer picture.
All right, so we've got this company that's experiencing incredible growth, building a powerful platform, racking up all these industry accolades, but they've also got this mysterious incident hanging over their heads, creating uncertainty about the future.
A fascinating mix of positives and potential negatives.
Very much so,
Yeah.
very much so.
Yeah.
Let's hold that thought for a moment and come back after a quick break to dive deeper into the financial details and what they tell us about CrowdStrike's overall health.
Sounds good.
All right, we'll be right back.
Okay. So, picking up where we left off, let's take a little bit of a closer look at those financials.
Okay.
One thing that kind of caught my eye was their mention of decoupling ARR and subscription revenue modeling in the short term.
Yeah, that was a little bit over my head.
Yeah, it's a little technical.
It sounds pretty technical. What's going on there?
I think it has something to do with those customer commitment packages that we were talking about earlier. Essentially because they're offering these CCPs, which can involve things like upfront payments or adjusted payment schedules.
Right.
The direct correlation between ARR, which reflects the value of their recurring contracts,
Okay.
and the revenue they can actually recognize in a given quarter gets a little fuzzy.
Okay, so it's not necessarily a red flag, just an accounting quirk caused by this incident.
Right, exactly. It's important to kind of look at the long-term trends and the underlying drivers of the business, not just these short-term fluctuations.
So speaking of long-term, they also provided some insights into their target operating model.
Yes.
What are they aiming for?
So they're setting their sights pretty high.
Right.
They're targeting a subscription gross margin of 82 to 85%.
Wow.
An operating margin of 28 to 32%,
Okay.
and a free cash flow margin of 34 to 38%.
So those are ambitious goals, but they reflect confidence in their ability to scale.
Right, exactly.
So those are targets, right?
Those are targets.
Where do they stand now?
So as of Q3, their subscription gross margin was a very healthy 80%. Their operating margin was 19%, and their free cash flow margin was 23%.
So they're on the right track, but there's some work to do.
Yeah, they've still got a little ways to go to hit those long-term targets.
Let's talk about some of those short-term numbers.
Okay.
We talked about free cash flow, but what about revenue and earnings?
Yeah.
How did they do in Q3?
So they reported total revenue of just over $1 billion for the quarter,
Wow.
which is a major milestone, especially for a company in the cybersecurity space.
Good to hear.
And their subscription revenue specifically, which is kind of the engine of their business,
Right.
grew by 31% year over year, reaching over $962 million.
Okay, so over $1 billion in revenue.
Yeah,
They're in the big leagues now.
they are.
What about their earnings?
So they reported non-GAAP diluted EPS of $0.93 for the quarter,
Okay.
which was up 13% compared to the same quarter last year.
So their earnings are growing right along with their revenue. That's a good sign.
Yeah, absolutely.
Shows they're not just getting bigger, they're also getting more efficient, which makes investors happy.
Yeah, generally.
It's important to remember that past performance is not indicative of future results.
Right, of course.
There's always those factors like this July 19th incident that can impact a company's trajectory.
Absolutely.
Let's shift gears a bit and talk about the bigger picture.
Okay.
What are some of the key trends you're seeing in the cybersecurity landscape as a whole?
So one trend I find fascinating is this convergence of security and IT operations.
Okay.
As companies kind of embrace digital transformation and cloud computing,
Right.
the lines between these two worlds are becoming increasingly blurred.
Okay, can you give an example of what that looks like in the real world?
Sure. So imagine a company moving its data centers to the cloud.
Okay.
Suddenly, their security team isn't just protecting physical servers in a locked room.
All right.
They're securing virtual servers spread across this vast network.
Right.
And they need to work closely with the IT team to make sure everything is configured correctly.
The security team's becoming more integrated with the IT team, working together to protect the company's assets.
Right. And this convergence creates both challenges and opportunities for cybersecurity companies like CrowdStrike.
Challenges, how so?
Well, as IT environments become more complex and more distributed,
Right.
it becomes harder to secure them.
Right.
Attackers are constantly finding new ways to exploit vulnerabilities.
Right.
So security teams need to be much more agile and proactive than ever before.
So it's not just about having the best technology, it's about having the right processes and people in place.
Absolutely. Cybersecurity is a team sport. It requires collaboration between security professionals, IT administrators, developers, and even business leaders.
Wow, so it's a big team.
It is.
You mentioned opportunities too. What are some of the opportunities that this convergence presents?
So one big opportunity is the ability to provide more holistic solutions that address both security and IT needs.
Okay.
And CrowdStrike is already moving in this direction with their Falcon platform,
Right.
which offers a suite of modules that span across different security domains.
So they're not just selling individual products, they're selling a platform that can adapt and grow
Exactly.
and integrate with their existing infrastructure.
Right, and as they continue to expand their platform and integrate with other IT solutions, they'll be well positioned to capture a larger share of this growing market.
It sounds like they're setting themselves up for success.
Yeah.
But what about the competition?
Right, the cybersecurity market is incredibly competitive.
Yeah.
There are a lot of companies vying for market share, both large and small.
Right.
Some of the key players include Microsoft, Palo Alto Networks, Sentinel, just to name a few.
So it's a crowded field.
It is.
What sets CrowdStrike apart?
Well, as we discussed, their cloud-native platform is a major differentiator.
Okay.
It allows them to deliver security solutions that are scalable, agile, and cost-effective.
Okay.
They can quickly adapt to new threats and changing customer needs without being bogged down by legacy infrastructure.
Got it.
They've also been very successful in building a strong brand reputation and attracting top talent.
Yeah, their name is pretty synonymous with innovation,
Right, exactly.
excellence in the cybersecurity industry.
Yeah,
Their focus on AI and machine learning seems to be a big part of their strategy, too.
absolutely.
Every cybersecurity company is talking about AI these days. But what is CrowdStrike doing that's different?
So they've been early adopters of AI and machine learning,
Okay.
and they've integrated these technologies very deeply into their platform.
Right.
This allows them to automate tasks, detect threats more effectively, and respond more quickly than traditional security solutions
Interesting.
that rely heavily on human analysis.
I'm curious, what about emerging technologies like generative AI?
Yeah, that's a great question.
How do you see that playing out in the cybersecurity landscape?
Well, generative AI has the potential to be both a powerful tool for defenders and a dangerous weapon for attackers.
Okay, a double-edged sword.
Yeah, in a way.
Can you give me some concrete examples?
Sure. So, on the one hand, generative AI can be used to create much more sophisticated phishing attacks. Imagine an AI that can generate highly personalized emails that are almost indistinguishable from legitimate messages,
Yeah.
making it much easier to trick people into clicking on malicious links or revealing sensitive information.
It's a scary thought.
Yeah, it is, but it can also be used for good.
Okay.
Generative AI can also be used to improve security posture.
Okay.
For example, it can be used to generate realistic attack simulations,
Okay.
to test a company's defenses, identify weaknesses, and train security teams to respond more effectively.
So it's like a race to see who can harness the power of generative AI more effectively.
Right.
The good guys and the bad guys.
It seems that way.
It sounds like we're entering a whole new era of cybersecurity.
In a way, yes, but it's important to remember that technology is only one part of the equation.
Right.
Human intelligence, creativity, and collaboration will always be essential in the fight against cybercrime.
It's not a set it and forget it type of thing.
No, absolutely not.
How do you see the role of cybersecurity evolving in society as a whole?
You're absolutely right. As our world becomes increasingly digital and interconnected, cybersecurity is no longer just a technical issue, it's a societal issue.
Okay.
It impacts everything from our personal privacy to our national security.
Right.
It's about ensuring that technology is used safely, responsibly, and ethically.
So the stakes are getting higher and higher.
They are, which is why it's so important to have companies like CrowdStrike that are dedicated to pushing the boundaries of innovation and making the digital world a safer place.
Okay, but it's not just on them, right?
No, it's not. It's important for all of us to be aware of the risks and take steps to protect ourselves and our organizations.
So it's a shared responsibility.
Absolutely.
Before we go, I did want to touch on one last financial tidbit.
Okay.
They did provide guidance for Q4 and the full fiscal year 2025.
They did.
What are they expecting?
So for Q4, they're projecting total revenue between $128.7 million and $1,035.4 million.
Okay.
And non-GAAP income from operations between $184 million and $189 million.
So they're expecting continued strong growth.
Right.
Even with that uncertainty from the July 19th incident.
They are, and they're also projecting full year 2025 total revenue between $3,923.8 million and $3,930.5 million.
Wow.
And non-GAAP income from operations between $804.4 million and $809.4 million.
Okay, so big numbers.
Yeah, but they're also acknowledging that these projections could change.
Right.
Depending on how this July 19th incident unfolds.
Of course, it's like trying to predict the weather.
Yeah, exactly.
So overall, how would you assess CrowdStrike's position?
Overall, it seems like CrowdStrike is in a very strong position, both financially and strategically.
Okay.
They're a company to watch, that's for sure.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
Growth and platform adoption to those questions about that July 19th incident and, of course, all those financials.
Yeah.
But what does all this mean for you, the listener?
Yeah.
You're trying to figure out CrowdStrike's place in this cybersecurity world.
Mm-hmm.
Where do they stand, and what should you be watching for as they move forward?
That's where the rubber meets the road, right? It goes beyond the numbers and the hype.
Yeah.
What we see here is a company at a crossroads.
Okay.
They've achieved some remarkable success, but they're also facing a whole new set of challenges. How they respond to those challenges will really determine if they can maintain that momentum and solidify their position as a leader in the space.
I like that, at crossroads.
Yeah.
So let's zoom out for a sec.
Okay.
What are the key takeaways?
So first and foremost, that July 19th incident,
Right.
we still need more information to really understand what happened and what the long-term impact might be. So pay close attention to how they communicate about it, what steps they take to address it, and whether it leads to any significant changes in their overall strategy.
Transparency is key, especially when you're dealing with something that could shake investor confidence.
Absolutely.
And beyond the incident, keep an eye on their platform strategy.
Right.
Can they keep attracting customers and get those existing customers to adopt more modules?
Yeah, that success is crucial for their long-term growth and profitability.
Yeah, it's all about that ecosystem, that stickiness, right? Once a customer is really embedded in that Falcon platform, it's harder for them to switch to a competitor.
Right.
Don't lose sight of the bigger picture.
Right.
The cybersecurity landscape as a whole.
The threat environment's constantly evolving.
Yeah.
CrowdStrike needs to stay ahead of the curve. They've put a lot of resources into AI and machine learning.
Right.
But so have their competitors.
So can they maintain that technological edge?
That's the big question.
It's a race against the bad guys, but it's also a race against other companies trying to solve the same problem.
Yeah, it's high stakes for sure.
To wrap things up, let's leave our listener with something to think about.
Okay.
We talk about CrowdStrike's strengths, but what about weaknesses?
Right. Every company has them.
What could trip them up in the future?
That's a great question. And to answer that, you have to go beyond just the information in their presentation.
Right.
You need to look at the whole industry, look at trends, and really read between the lines.
Yeah.
So, for example, could their reliance on cloud infrastructure make them vulnerable to certain kinds of attacks?
Yeah.
Could their rapid growth lead to integration issues as they acquire other companies?
Right.
Could their focus on large enterprises mean they're overlooking smaller businesses?
Interesting questions.
Yeah. And we're not going to give you the answer.
We want you to do your own research.
Exactly.
Come to your own conclusions.
This is what makes it a real deep dive.
Right.
We're giving you the tools to become a more informed part of the cybersecurity world.
So until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and stay secure.
Sounds good.